Okay, maybe we can kick off here. Firstly, if I'll do my best to introduce you, Ethan in Westport.
Yep.
How are you doing? And Ashley in Westport. And if somebody wanders in later, that'll be Marcel. And here we have, for those of you who don't know, I don't know how many are in the camera, but we've got Aaron and Nafika, who some of you will have seen before, and Noreen. Noreen is brave enough to be new to this group. Just to remind you how this setup will work, the delivery of it, I think most of you have probably had a chance to point out that these are basically university level papers and we treat them much the same as that. So there's one lecture a week for each subject, so there's one lecture a week for marketing at this time. And we, so typically you will get handouts for most classes, and we also video them. So if for some reason you can't actually get here, which is often happens for mature students, or if you feel the need to revise a bit or look at something again, you're very welcome just to ask, and we can give you a copy of the vid. They don't transmit particularly well, so because they're pretty big files. A typical DVD file for one of these sessions is the thick end of 3 gigabytes, so loading that onto most stuff takes a wee bit of doing. So normally we just flick you a disc. Hello Marcel, how are you?
Hi, good.
Surviving? Good?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's about how it works. The first thing I will do is draw your attention to the course outline handout, which is the bit of a guide as to where we're heading and what this course covers. So, third page in is the official prescription for it. This ultimately is administered by the Qualifications Authority. And then if you turn the page again, we get the detail. So for Learning Outcome 1, you will see that we're in effect introducing the philosophy of marketing. For Learning Outcome number 2, we talk about environmental factors for marketing decisions. So an obvious environmental factor for the West Coast at the moment is that all businesses are taking a hiding from the reduction in coal mining and from dairying prices, which are running at, by and large, below break even for almost all farms. So for two very big industries, we're under some sort of stress. The positive side is that we have a reasonably virile tourism industry at the moment. I suppose you can sort of say one door shuts and the other one opens, but I think there's a fairly big door that's shut at the moment. Those of you that take any notice of it will see that the global dairy auction prices went up a little bit more than usual last night, so he's hoping. Learning Outcome 3, over the page. Now this is really, in a nutshell, this Learning Outcome is really all about market research. Learning Outcome 4 is buyer behaviour, and some of you have already indicated you're eventually going to do the buyer behaviour paper. There is a bit of an overlap with that, so when you've done this bit, you will have done a wee bit of the buyer behaviour paper. And Learning Outcome 5 is all about the matter of what we call segmenting markets. So almost for everything, you can really say that only part of a total population will buy it or to be available for it. Is there anything you can think of that you could probably say that can or is sold to almost anybody in the world? What product or service could you say is sold to almost anybody in the world, probably, or could be?
Water.
Yeah, sort of, but there's an awful lot of countries that you really can't sell water to, like packaged food. No, get down to a product. Coca-Cola.
Oh,
Coca-Cola, the world over. So, segmentation is more or less saying there's very, very few products or services you can sell to everybody. Usually, the market is cut up in some way. And we'll talk a reasonable more about that as we get to it. And the last, learning outcome 6 is basically a small bit to the question of setting marketing objectives. And the learning outcome 7 is in effect where you will be asked to produce a marketing strategy which reflects the so-called marketing mix. And that may not mean a lot to you at the moment, but soon it will. So that's roughly how it hangs together. Now, this is basically an introductory session, so I will run a few PowerPoint slides to put the thing in context. Now, you will find these slides copied off at the back of your handout. You have a slightly longer set on the back of your handout than this. I pulled a few out of here that are probably not quite so necessary. So, the question to first look at is what marketing really is. Somehow or another, we've got to get people away from thinking of marketing it as more or less advertising or possibly some sort of promotion. It is a good deal more significant than that. Now, depending on how your mind works and how you see things, the question is marketing perhaps the most important thing for a business, the most important function? See, what happens probably is accountants will say, well, if we don't keep the finances in order, we won't have a business. And the production people will say, well, we won't have a business if we're not making things, and so on and so on. So there's always a little bit of a question of the relative importance of things. But I think probably, depending on where you come from, we might argue that if you haven't got a market, then you can't do anything else. And so marketing is probably quite a critical starting point for business. So a simple definition is this one here, which is really emphasising matching. The challenge is to match what we are doing or think we could do to what some group of people or a potential market needs or wants. So I'll say that again. We're setting out to match what a firm produces, a product or a service, and the challenge is to match that with a significant group of the population who will buy it. So we're matching up a firm making or providing a service and a market. The point, of course, obviously being, it's not much use making something that nobody wants. Now, there is a more significant definition of marketing, and that's this one on the PowerPoint. And it's one of these definitions that almost every word is relevant for when we're thinking about marketing. So at the risk of going round and round in circles, I will read and then break this up for you. So it's saying the conception, pricing, promotion and distribution of ideas, goods and services that satisfy customer and business objectives. In other words, what customers need and want and what the business would like to do. So this is a reasonably intelligent sort of definition because it covers everything. So let's start with successful marketing needs people to conceive of something, to conceive a product or a service, to conceive a potential market. In other words, think about them, build a picture for yourself of these things. Having done that, in marketing we then have to price the product. It has to be a price that reflects what it's costing the business to make or provide the thing and what the customer is willing to pay. And I'm sure you will eventually realise that the customer is not always looking for the cheapest price. Customers generally have price expectations for things. What would you expect to pay for a long black coffee? Roughly.
$4.50.
Okay, so the point being here is that around about $4, $4.50 seems to be a going rate, ironically enough, almost all around the world. If you convert your currency and say London back into New Zealand dollars, it's still about $4.50. Anyhow, that over time has probably been what people expect to pay for a coffee. If you're selling coffee or offering coffee to customers at $3 a cup, you're going to immediately be a bit suspicious. Although I wish really that some coffee shops would think about making some really nice bulk coffee in an urn that you could buy for $3 and you didn't have to wait for half an hour while they made the darn thing. But so anyway, there's that sort of thing. On the other hand, somewhere around about $5.50, $6 you'd be saying, hey, wait a minute, that's getting to be a pretty dear coffee. And so pricing is actually quite complicated to get it right. Anyhow, I've only got as far as pricing. Promotion. On the one hand, you have to let people know what you're doing, somehow or another, which leads immediately into advertising, which starts to encourage people to buy what you're selling. So, if you look at in the early days of the Grey Star and the old Grey Argus, most of the old newspapers had the advertisements all on the front. If you look at the old editions of the press, the same. And the advertisements were quite strange really. They were basically letting people know they had something to sell. So the advertisements were fairly small, and there's some dag phrases too, like Bill Smith and Son begs to advise that we have a new shipment of shoes. So that's in effect telling you that Bill Smith's got some shoes. And then there might be another one. Mary Jones advises that the SS, Steamship X has arrived in port, and they therefore have some imports of X, Y, and Z product. Now, of course, this promotional advertising is very sophisticated, and you can just see, can't you, from looking at the TV and the newspapers and everything, the extent to which products and services are pushed very hard. Sometimes effectively, sometimes not. And sometimes you almost wonder, well, we probably are being conned. Some of these are probably, well, if you get Briscoes or Harvey Normans or Noel Leemings, people like that, they're constantly saying, last minute sales, 30% off everything. But you never quite know whether it's 30% off what. What are they taking 30% off? And the answer, if you tackle them, will be off the recommended retail price, which is, so what? They very seldom are selling at the recommended price. And so they're using all sorts of things, discounts finish on Monday. But of course there'll be a whole lot more next Monday too, and so on and so on. So it's become quite a sophisticated science. So we got as far as that. Conceiving of something, product, service in the market, pricing for it, promoting it as a minimum, letting people know you've got it, and the distribution. Now somehow or another, if you have a product or a service, you have to be able to tell people how they can get it. And that's actually quite important in this day and age. Originally it was come to Mary Smith's shop. But now, of course, we're up to online, we're all sorts of things. So, then we have the three possible areas of things that are saleable. So, it's becoming increasingly important that ideas are saleable. It's jargonised into intellectual property and all this sort of thing. But more than ever, this notion that ideas in themselves have value if the idea is good and useful. Then, of course, the ones we almost always have: goods, cans of baked beans; services, an accounting firm. Some sort of hybrid, like a restaurant, is a bit of both. The service is you being waited on and all the rest. The goods is the meal that you've gone into the restaurant for. And the final bit is that this hangs together on the basis that we are seeking to satisfy customer and business objectives. Now, it's helpful to look at marketing, and for that matter business, as an economic activity. So economics is focused on how resources are used. By resources they mean physical resources like wood or steel or something like that. And money is a resource, and people are a resource. And so, these resources are used to reduce goods and services, that's a key bit of marketing, to satisfy people's needs and wants. That's a critical bit of marketing. So essentially marketing is an economic process. And it works something like this. In any economy, we have firms, if you like, or organisations which produce ideas, goods and services. At the smallest level, it can be individuals, then small businesses, then firms which are varying size, companies of varying size, and eventually very large companies or corporations. The other arm of this is the consumers. Consumer needs and wants. That can be individuals or very often seen in terms of households. In New Zealand, a household probably averages something like about near enough to 3 people. But of course the numbers vary a bit depending on the number of children and dependents and relations and etc, etc, etc. And so the economic system works roughly like this. Money goes around. So these producers produce the products and services directed towards the consumers, and the consumers pay for them. The producers then pay individuals and householders mainly for labour or wages. So that's how it goes that way. And that is really at the heart of an economic system at its simplest. And this is really what marketing is all about. So the next thing we have to look at very carefully is what they are trying to do and what they are trying to do. What will satisfy them and what will satisfy them. And so the consumers seek to maximise satisfaction. That's what we're saying. It doesn't mean that consumers seek to buy the cheapest. They want to maximise satisfaction. Producers, on the other hand, want to maximise profit. And that's reasonably simple. Profit means, obviously, that we are getting in more money than we're paying out. Maximising satisfaction is really the big challenge for marketing. What is going to satisfy a consumer? You could say, for argument's sake, that a fundamental need for a consumer is clothing. So a whole hunk of people might be prepared to make a choice to satisfy them of mainly jeans or denim apparel or something like that. And that would satisfy a considerable number of people who would be quite happy to make that sort of purchase. But the jeans, in order that they be completely satisfied, they may actually want to see a label on them like Wrangler or something like that to feel really happy, a branded one. And sometimes, of course, consumers will only buy so much or only have so much money available to buy. Either way, consumers end up having to make choices. If a student walks out on a Friday night with $10 to spend, they've got choices. They might go and drink it all. They might go and eat it all. They might go to a movie or some mixture of all three. So they're making choices to satisfy themselves. And that sets up on a mega scale, all round, all people, all households, all individuals, choices being made all the time. Now, I don't want to make this sound like a whole heap of jargon, but I want here to introduce the idea that people perceive things or see things differently. People have views about things. They may or may not be accurate. But it doesn't matter. If they have a view about something, that will largely influence how they buy and how the market acts. It's not entirely money driven. So both Westport and Greymouth have two supermarkets. You've got New World and you've got Countdown. Now I'm not going to go through individually and all the rest, but I'm just going to point out something you probably realise. That different people will have a different perception of New World and of Countdown. You may or may not be accurate even when you talk about their price. I mean, we could measure the price of your shopping basket in each one and say, well, by and large it's going to be cheaper there or there. But measuring a shopping basket's a little bit of so what too. So people will have a view on whether Countdown is cheaper than New World or New World is cheaper than Countdown. And if you go and do surveys and whatnot, you'll find that people's views aren't actually that accurate. But that's how they see it. So if they think New World is cheaper than Countdown and they want to buy on a limited budget, that's where they'll go, even if they're wrong. Then of course it gets more complicated because people then have perceptions about the quality of where they're going. Now my little perception is, for instance, that there's racks and racks and racks of wines in both outlets. And New World are constantly pushing them and they have a great range of wines. But my perception is that Countdown has actually got better and cheaper wines. That's what I think, but you probably won't think that, and so on. You get that sort of thing. You then also get the people who will chase specials. They'll go to Countdown for something and then drive to New World for something else, forgetting about the petrol they bought to do it, and so on. So this is all to do with behavioural economics, and it's recognising that people behave in certain ways even if it's not particularly reasonable or rational. And this is very important for marketing. So all we're really saying is that behavioural economics recognises that decisions that people make will not always be in accordance with a rational theory of economics. And that'll do for this bit of economics. You can read the bits if you want to, but now I'm cheating a little bit here because this has come from a class we took in China, so it's a little bit more relevant for those 300 students than it is for our 5 or 6. But however, think about this. You live in a city, you are married but have no children, you both have good jobs, and you are dinks. Do you know that phrase? Double income, no kids? Yeah. And the question is, which car will you buy? That is a Chinese Geely car. And if they priced it honestly in New Zealand, you could buy that car in New Zealand dollars for about $12,000. It's a pretty cheap car, brand new, with a guarantee. Now, for the sake of argument, and this is basically true, that is a perfectly good car. They are quite good cars. You and your little family can do anything you want to with that. Go to work, go for a trip somewhere, go out for Sunday afternoon, and all the rest. That car will do fine. You don't need anything else. You could, of course, go right up the other end. There's a BMW Series 3 or something like that. Now, as we all know, that the New Zealand dollar equivalent of things like this are way up into 50,000s. So, a whole great hunk of Chinese students would buy that one. And when you ask them why, I mean, I'd buy that one. Why would you buy that one? Because people would see me driving it and think, oh, he must be earning a lot of money. Well, anyhow, all that's really showing is, and you've only got to think for a moment, don't you, at the huge range of models of cars and SUVs and goodness knows what else you can get. When people buy that sort of thing, or fashion clothing, they're not really acting very rationally. They are very much acting as to how they perceive something. And you get some quite strange things that happen. These are hoodies. Now, these things have lasted for a long time. There have been hoodies around for, take your pick, 10 years at least, probably more. And they are seriously, seriously popular form of clothing. And it is very, very hard to pin down why people buy them. Because the first thing is you go around and you say, so this is a hoodie, and somebody fairly cynical like me says, how often do you actually use the hoodie, the hood bit? And the answer is never, most of the time. Why? Because it messes up my hair, is what they say. But see, this is quite curious. Here people have bought these hoodies, but they haven't bought them for the hoods. Except in very rare cases when you perhaps go to a rugby match or something like that. And that, you see, is a clear perception thing. It's some sort of mix of fashion, comfort, want to be seen to be looking like something. There's all sorts of reasons why I suppose these hoodies are popular. So what I'm really trying to push across hard here is that people's perceptions strongly influence buying decisions. And the challenge for marketing is to know as much as you can about people's perceptions of what your organisation does and how they see it. So in things like shoes, perceptions all the way. I mean, you could buy an ordinary pair of shoes. You could say that a lot more people are using sneakers or trainer type of shoes now. Sort of what those are, I suppose, but it still doesn't. It's still not the only type of shoe. So our first challenge then is to sort out some information about how a potential market for our organisation sees us and sees our products and services. When we've done that, we can think about cutting up the market into realistically sized pieces. I was nearly going to say you wouldn't be selling hoodies to very young children, but as a minute I thought to myself, that's not true. You probably sell hoodies now to kids about that height. Now, going with this is the notion of how we build perceptions. And if you look in your handout number 1 there, the introduction one, I'm going to jump a bit about, for fifth page in, is a page headed Moments of Truth. Now, for any organisation engaged in dealing with people, customers, there are dozens and dozens of moments of truth. Now, this guy, Carlton, started to recognise just how critical it was to recognise that in any transaction with customers there were generally a hang of a lot of moments of truth. And every time you came to that moment of truth, it could produce a positive or a negative reaction on the customer. And of course the negative ones are darn hard to correct. If they build a negative perception, it's like everybody goes away and says, oh, don't go there, this and that, and all the rest. A positive perception doesn't get passed on quite as much. Usually it can do if it's really good. But so we need to do this. I'll just, without labouring it, I'll just point out some of these things which could be relevant. Most of you have probably at some stage travelled in an airline, have you? Probably? One way and another? Right. So the customer calls the airline for information. That could be a first moment of truth. Now, that of course is probably going to depend on phone manners or an email response, because sometimes people make an inquiry of an airline through email, and in this day and age quite a lot of that is shortcut by booking on a website, in which case you have to chase around sometimes for information. I recall one time in the US we wanted to go from San Francisco to Seattle, something like that. The places don't matter. It was a wet Sunday afternoon, and I rang up Continental Airlines. There was a very chatty person on the other end of the phone, and she was trying to be quite helpful and all the rest. And she started to put the bite on me to buy the ticket. And I said, you seem quite keen to sell the ticket. I said, tell me more about what you're actually doing here. And she said, well, we have to answer 15 calls. We have to be able to answer 15 calls an hour, and we have to get a target of X reservations. She's quite open about that. I said, well, I'm sure I can help you with that. I don't particularly want to make a reservation. And she said to me, I'll tell you what, could you make a reservation and then cancel it later on? So that was pretty bad. At least I had quite a favourable view of them. The next one, where it says the customer books the flight with the airline representative, which could be a travel agent. And that, of course, means that an airline like Air New Zealand has to at least give a passing thought that if any one of us goes down to Flight Centre or House of Travel or whatever the other ones are, that they are going to serve my airline well. And that, of course, you can't always guarantee that if you're the airline. Then you do the bit if the customer arrives at the airport counter and joins a queue 100 yards long and all this, and that can make quite a difference too. And so on. So I think you can sort of get the drift here. You could be quite impressed about an airline service until you get to a seriously grumpy cabin crew or something like that, and all the good work would be wrecked by the fact that that bit with the grumpy cabin crew didn't work for you. Now that is true of almost any organisation. Supposing you're going down to, we'll say we're going down to buy something, it might be a TV set or it might be a pair of shoes, and you walk in the door. Now there's the first one, there's the make or break. How you're treated at that point can make a hang of a difference. What's your view, top of your head, about people's performance in your experience when you walk into a shop to buy a pair of shoes or a jacket or a TV set or something like that, or even buy a cup of coffee, I suppose? Do they get that bit right when you're walking in?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, isn't it, I suppose? I mean, sometimes people can be, a couple of shop assistants can be talking to each other and not stop talking. Or they can be on the phone, which is worse. Yeah. So firms have to think about that, because a firm could have a tremendous range of product, pretty good prices, but they could cheese off a person as they're coming into the shop and lose them. Now, that can become quite a science. I'm sure this doesn't happen over on the coast. It probably, I'm not certain it happens even in Christchurch. I know it happens with the very big retailers in places like London. They have a thing called footfall conversion. So they keep a measure of the number of people that are coming into the shop. So it's an electronic counter that counts them as they go in the shop. And the number of people who in effect go out of the shop having bought something. So what they're looking for is the conversion rate. 500 people walked into the shop and 200 people walked out of the shop having bought something. Hey, wait a minute, 300 people came in and didn't buy something. And so they start getting very interested in this footfall conversion. And that is a clue to how people are reacting to coming into the shop and how they're treated, and for that matter, the product range and all this sort of thing. I don't think they do it here, but some shops
does.
do they? Oh, that's good. Yeah. I think it's actually quite a smart thing to do. It's almost an automatic measure of performance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody has had the brains to tell them to do it, I guess. So, that's the notion of the moments of truth. Now let's go back to the start of this handout. And the list of topics there. I'm going to relatively quickly run down that list of topics so that you get some understanding of where we're at. There is some written commentary, more about that Moments of Truth, on the page following the Moments of Truth sheet. Get back to the start. We've talked a fair bit about marketing, and eventually we will talk a good deal more about services marketing. So, services marketing is when somebody is providing for you or able to provide for you a service. Now, an accountant provides you with a service, produces a GST return or something like that. A plumber provides you with a service to fix the leaking hot water valve, whatever it is, and so on. Now, the critical point about services is that the service or the quality of the service very much depends on the person who provides the service. So if you go and buy a can of beans in the supermarket it doesn't much matter who sells you the can of beans or anything like this, it's still a can of beans. And you'll reach your conclusion about that brand or that type or something like that. If, however, you're in the business of getting a plumber out to do something to your plumbing, then immediately it's got a lot more to do with the person providing the service. If you're calling on an accounting service, that has an awful lot to do with the person providing the accounting service. Now, you could make quite a cynical argument that says a person that is very good at the interpersonal connection with you can almost get away with murder in what they're actually doing because you like them so much. You're a classic example of that would be a hypothetical restaurant situation. You're going in to a cafe bar or something like that to have a meal. Pretty so-so, they've introduced you, they've taken you to a table, you're feeling reasonably good at that. But they're fairly sort of ho-hum about their attitude to you. They pretty much put down the menu to go. Eventually, you're starting to wait an awful long time to get any service, and you weren't particularly impressed with the person that pretty much dumped down the menus on the table and left you fairly quickly. And so you start to get a bit snippy about that. If, however, a very, very cheerful person comes and chats you up about it, you're getting on well, the interpersonal contact's good, you're not going to be so worried about waiting. Basically, you would almost be prepared to give them time to go and catch the fish that they're going to serve you, sort of thing. So that's this argument where the interpersonal provision of the service is very, very important. And this comes down to things like, are they reasonably well dressed? Do they look as if they know what they're doing? Are they actually carrying some tools? And all of this sort of thing. So that's the message of the provision of service. It is associated with the people providing the service. We had talked about customer needs and wants, but just to re-emphasise that, we used the jargon at the start that customers want to maximise satisfaction. Now, there was an ad on TV, and for the life of me I can't remember it, but customers, potential customers for products and services, in some cases have a need. They need it for some reason. They've got to eat, or they really do have to get the tax return in, or something like that. So that is a need. And so for them to be satisfied, they're looking for the need to be satisfied. A want is something you would don't really like to go with it. You could, I think the example I'm trying to think of is actually a holiday. You could say, oh, I need a holiday. The stress at work's been awful this last few months, and so on and so on and so on. I need a holiday. I really need to get away from home. So to fulfill that need, I might say to myself, well, okay, but I might get down to Dunedin, or I might go to Australia because the airfares are quite cheap. What I'd really like to do, or want to do, is actually go and lie on a beach in Hawaii. Something like that. So that we distinguish between needs and wants. I need clothing. I can satisfy that with jeans, but I really want a pair of fashionable branded jeans. Needs and wants. Then we come to looking down these headings, thinking about types of marketing or marketing approaches. The notion of the product production concept is that we have to try and sell everything we're making. We can produce 100,000 cans of beans in a year. That's what we've got to sell. The product concept is saying people need clothing. We will make hoodies. That's our choice. We are going to try and convince people to go for hoodies. The selling concept is we have to concentrate on selling what we make, not necessarily what the customer wants. The marketing concept is exactly what we've been talking about, satisfying customer needs and wants, and fitting it up with what we are doing. Societal marketing concepts are something we will talk quite a lot more about. This is almost like a study of sociology, where we will talk more in this course about people being connected with a group, or a social group, or a population group, or something like that. And we start to try and understand that people tend to buy along the lines of influences from their social groups, or how they want to be seen in their societies. Now, I'll just give you a few examples which may not make a lot of sense to you, but they will later on in the course, I promise you. You could say that in our social group, people are reasonably interested in fitness, and so they're going running and they're playing tennis and all of this sort of thing. And so, we might be in a firm that says, okay, well this is pretty good, we'll start selling sporting type of clothing. And running gear, all the various complicated footwear you now seem to be able to buy for going running in, and all of this sort of thing. And after a while, you start to see some quite interesting patterns. I was in Japan one time and had not much to do on a Sunday afternoon, and I was walking down the streets of one of the cities, and it slowly started to dawn on me. There were an awful lot of people, younger people usually, walking along in what I'd sort of call tennis gear, tennis shorts and lightweight shoes, and carrying tennis rackets and shades over there. Like big hair. That's odd. So I said to the fellow that I was visiting over there the next day, I said, hey listen, I went for blah 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 blah. I said, there are a hell of a lot of people wearing tennis gear. What's the story? And he said, oh, they're not playing tennis, they just want to look like they're playing tennis. And this is the syndrome that have people, and this is, I tell you what, I promise you this is absolutely true. In the area my daughter lives in London, there's a hang of a lot of people driving these SUVs of different sorts. Range Rovers, Range Discoveries, Mercedes, this, all the rest, dozens of them. They're all black, as it happens. But they've got ski racks on top of them, those ski bin things. But they never go skiing in them. And they've got spray-on mud to make it look as if they've been out, off-roading and all the rest. And so they're wanting to look like they do these things. The phrase is wannabes. I want to be seen as... There's an awful lot of buying goes on in this so-called societal marketing of thinking about how people want to be seen, or how people are responding to fashions and activities that they are close to. The final challenge is, in this day and age, to be thinking about globalisation. You could, without being too dramatic, say that the world is our oyster. There is almost nothing to stop people buying and selling internationally, especially in New Zealand. There's almost no restrictions on the amount of stuff you can bring into New Zealand, and companies can bring into New Zealand. There is nothing to stop you selling overseas if you can find a market. Financial exchanges are very easy. They're almost easier into and out of New Zealand than they are anywhere else in the world, actually. It's a very open money market in New Zealand. And the other thing is, of course, in this day and age of electronic communications, internet, emails, and so on. I must have taken something over to London for my son-in-law, and he said, "Oh, I need to pay you for that. How am I going to do that?" You know, he's reasonably sophisticated. And I said, "Just write me a cheque." He said, "You can't do that." And I said, "Yes, I can. Yes, I can." And he said, "No, the bloody. She actually can bring a cheque home from London, written with pounds, and take it to the bank and bank it." They go through the process of converting it to New Zealand dollars. It was very straightforward. He couldn't believe it. So we do actually, we are pretty well set up for that sort of thing in New Zealand. So for buying and selling, it's not that difficult. And this means that more and more we also have to think about fashions and activities and whatnot that people see when they visit overseas, on the television and everything. We're in a world connection, more and more. The Olympics are just coming up. How many millions of people will be watching the Olympics? And the World Cup in soccer wasn't that long ago, was it? And the Rugby World Cup wasn't that long ago either. Now, if I'll just flick a few pages in this handout so you can see the sort of thing I'm pretty keen on you having a little bit of a read up. If you turn the page over from the topic page, you'll see the one-headed principles of marketing. And there's a couple of pages there that are elaborating a bit more on the definition of marketing. It'd be good if you could read that. And we've seen moments of truth. And if you want to engage yourself in a little exercise, it's a smaller class, we won't get you to do it as a quick group. You might want to have a little bit of a think about some of the moments of truth that could apply to a situation that you are familiar with, either your work or organisation or something like that. Then I've put down here to get us thinking a little bit about what is essentially our local market and some of the realities of looking at it. So, there's some, the census data is usually fairly old, but there's a whole list of bullet points there that are talking about characteristics of households in Greenhouse. I think we are now better for our access to internet. We weren't good. Then we get the numbers of households, those that were rented and those that were home. So the Greenmouth area market is not big, is it? There's only a certain number of things that could operate economically in Greymouth. So sometimes in a business to be operated on the coast, we're going to need to be thinking about perhaps marketing outside Greymouth. Now, I don't want to be all dramatic about this, but the simple fact is that it would be virtually impossible to operate a polytechnic on the west coast if that's the only place you could go to. So we, of course, have to operate outside of the west coast as well as on the west coast. So when you think in terms of the population and the number of households and so on in Greymouth, there are some things that one has to consider in order to make sure you are realistic about a market size. And if it matters to you, there's one or two ways you can do this. One, if you want to sort of compare business propositions, one way of doing it is to get hold of the yellow pages and find relatively small towns and very small cities in New Zealand and look in the yellow pages for the number of business organisations in that particular town or district that are much the same as what you might be interested in. I'll just give you a little bit of an idea on this. Supposing you wanted to run a chemist shop in Greymouth. There's a vague rule of thumb that says you need around about a population of around about 3,000 to run a chemist shop. And that would be very small, a chemist shop. Now, the Greymouth area then sort of running at a population of around 10,000, 12,000 if you take in sort of outline areas. So that suggests you could actually probably have about 3 chemist shops. But we don't, we have 2. And when you look at it, those two actually seem to me to do quite well. So it sort of suggests that that ratio is probably not a million miles out. Sometimes if you're searching for a bit of, some people looking for a bit of a business opportunity, do a little bit of analysis like that, and they look around and they say, hey, hang on a minute, Leaston, just out of Christchurch, they've only got 1 shoe shop. They probably could easily take a second one. Things like that. Sometimes you can see gaps too. Now, I know I'm probably ignoring Westport here, and I'm sorry about that, but if you ever wanted to fiddle with those figures, you could take about 2/3 of them for things like numbers of households and so on. Don't want to be rude, but you probably could take 2/3, but maybe that's not going up. It's more like going down, isn't it? The other thing for a bit of reality is to turn the page and you can get a bit of information on household spending if you need it at any one time. And that gives you some spending data. Particularly those 2 lists on the average weekly spending for 2 different types of households. That probably just introduces a note of reality into what some markets might be. And so there's a little bit more data about that. The district is well served, really, for a newspaper. I sometimes think to myself, we're pretty lucky they can keep going, actually. They do. There's a heap of radio stations, mainly because all you seem to need is a computer to have a radio station now. So there's a heap of radio stations. and there's various other forms of things like the messenger, good print services for brochures, and so on. Now, the last thing for me to do tonight, because this is really only an introductory session, is to draw attention to how this thing's assessed. If you go to your course outline, and you look at that prescription page, which is the third page in, headed Prescription Fundamentals of Marketing. Right, the first assessment that you will get in a week or two will cover probably around the first 4 learning outcomes, and it will be in the form of what we call a reading and analysis assessment. And I'll give it to you reasonably soon, because there'll be nothing to stop you sort of doing it as you go through these topics. And how these hang together, some of you are familiar with them, but Rena, you won't be, and Ethan probably won't be. A typical reading and an analysis question could be asking you to talk about something, and the answers basically lie in your handouts or whatever, and we're probably getting you to put it in your own words or something like that. And then the other type of question will be a so-called analysis question, and it might say something like, suggest 2 benefits of such and such and 2 limitations of such and such. Now, those won't always be necessarily absolutely right or wrong answers. They will be more like your opinion. And if your opinion or review is reasonable and sensible, you get the mark. It's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. So that will be the first one. The second one will be largely revolving around the question of this segmentation, targeting, positioning, and so on. And the last and final one, which is the fairly grunty one, accounting for around about 40% of the course, this will be when we are getting you to prepare marketing strategies, which will be based around what we call the marketing mix. Now, you'll get full briefing on all of that, you'll have the information. So, none of those 3 assessments are exams. They are all based on the notion that you get it handed out to you and you complete it over a given time. So in probably a couple of weeks I'll give you, I don't think it'll be next week, but the week after I'll probably give you the first one, and you can start chonking your way through it, and it'll have a deadline out there somewhere. And then much the same thing with the other 2. Now, are there any questions, comments, worries?
No.
With the relatively small classes, I'll just go back to what I was talking about at the start of the course and how we deliver these, lecture style. You're doing quite a bit of the work, but like university, and based on the assignments and so on. However, you are very welcome, both Kate and I, for any classes that Kate's taking. We're certainly happy enough to take emails from you on queries. Don't let something stew and worry about it. I didn't really understand that. We'll take emails from you, no problem. Sometimes it might be a bit slow in answering them, but by and large, we'll take emails from you. So you might want to write down my email, ENHIANH at tpp.org.nz. I think the other thing I probably need to point out in fairness to you, could I say that we will be confining communication to and from you by email, if that's okay. I'm not really into texts, and I'm a million miles away from Facebooks and things like that, so I think we'll do what our partner university does over in Scotland. They say email only for coming in and out. Does that pose any problems to anybody? You got access to emails? Yep. Okay, that's good. And we will likewise communicate with you if we want to say something about a class or a change or something that's important. Anything else? I think I might have said to you the other night, you guys in Westport, I'll make a reasonable number of visits where we turn the thing round and deliver it from Westport. Much the same as last time. You happy enough with that?
Yep.
Good. Okay, that's about it. The other two people that aren't here, looks like I'll be cutting DVDs for them. Thank you for that. Thanks for coming in.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks again. See you next week.
Thanks, yeah, sure. An amusing time at 3C. They were, there's a group of them working on a bit of a project, and I come into the room and they didn't have the microphone on. They didn't necessarily need me. I'd just come to be there if they wanted.
Yeah.
And I really panicked because they were up there, I could see them talking and everything, but they hadn't put their microphone on. The next time I went up and I said, I had an entertaining time last week. You know, you were sitting there, you're going on about this and that and the other thing. It was quite entertaining listening to you. Could you hear us? Panic.
Oh, no, that's cool. Hey, and just a question.
Yes.
though. I am booked in for the biobehaviour one as well.
Yes.
But I said to Kate,
Yes.
because I haven't done anything past level 4 study, and that was a long time ago through my work. I didn't know how it'd go, and she suggested maybe sitting on 2 sessions tonight and see or not.
Right.
I'm just not too sure though.
Okay. I'll tell you what's happened with the reality of that.
Okay.
Up until last night, there was only one person signalling any interest to do that, and
Right.
they were on our staff. That's okay. Then they decided 2 of them would do it. Now, they will tend to work together, I sort of know that. But you are very welcome to do it. Look, the reality is that the key to it really is the time busy people have to commit to doing it. Some people do them one by one, like one semester, and some people do them by 2.
Yeah.
If you have a reasonable amount of time and you can get a bit of space, you know, that doesn't have whatever else goes on in people's lives, you know, that you can get an hour or 2 or 3 away pretty much on your own uninterrupted. That's really the key to it.
Okay.
Because we support them fairly strongly, and as I say, we're quite happy enough to take emails and whatnot, and because of the nature of the assessments, we really, if people are prepared to sort of commit themselves to doing it, basically, you don't really fail.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess it's over to you, really.
Yeah, I'm sure because like I said, level 4 study
Yeah.
years ago, and
Yeah.
I've never been to uni or anything, so I'm not confident of my capabilities at this point. And I do work a 40-hour week job plus
Yes,
sometimes,
yes.
so I'm conscious of that. Yeah.
So, what's the short answer to that? Assuming we have 2 people doing it, the first short answer is next week they will probably come in. If you care to join in and just have a look at how it hangs together, that'll be fine.
And that's at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it is. Both the marketing and the biobehaviour paper have fairly grunty final assessments, you know, like we have, you know, it's more than just looking stuff up in books and whatnot. It's,
Yep.
yeah, I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
The biobehaviour one's probably the more difficult of the two
Yep.
for that particular purpose.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that next week.
I think my gut feeling is the same, just do one.
Yeah,
So you know, do the marketing one first and then.
yeah. It's very hard to advise people.
Yeah.
I mean,
For sure.
I reckon that I probably, in meeting with students that are sort of talking about taking these papers, I would say something like 3/4 of them at least take the position is that they, I don't really know, I haven't sort of studied for ages and all the rest.
Yeah.
And they never believe me when I tell them that by March they do all right.
Mm.
Yeah, and, I mean, the other reasonably interesting thing about mature students, by mature I mean not school
For
leavers,
sure.
is that